Yeah, it takes me. Alrighty. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Authenticity with Alicia, the podcast where we explore burnout, the pressures of society, and our quest for identity and authenticity. I'm Alicia, and today we are joined by Billie Ferguson. She is a therapist, coach, consultant, and just overall space holder. I love that that's something that I think is very genuine for her, and I'm excited for you guys to get to chat with her. I've gotten to know Billie for a little bit in different circles of life. And so thank you, Billie, for taking time out of your day and joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm
Uh,
always excited to talk with you. And so to talk with you in this kind of way is super excited. I'm excited for you.
I'm so excited. I'm like, we're just gonna be authentic today, and like we didn't really
Yeah,
plan anything. We're just gonna have a great combo,
let's do
and
it.
we're just doing the brand of authenticity. And so, to start, you wear a couple different roles of coach, consultant. You do a lot of networking. You're a therapist, and so how does authenticity show up in those different spaces?
So I think authenticity just means, not just, but it means following yourself and following like what feels true to you, right? And so in the therapy world, we have, for very important reasons, pretty hard ethical guidelines that we have to follow. And sometimes what feels right for me doesn't necessarily go into like fit into that box. Not to say that like it's unethical, like let me be very clear about
Yeah.
that, but just what, for example, I'm in Oklahoma, right? Just what Oklahoma says is true and right is the box.
Yeah.
And so when I do things like energy work, for example, um, I one of the modalities that I can use involves touching people, and in therapy we know to be, again, very important, very cautious with that, and like in therapy we wouldn't touch anybody. However, in energy work, getting somebody's permission, that's a different story. So again, authenticity in that means doing what feels right for me and aligned for me and the person that I'm working with. So that's why, in a therapy role, I wouldn't do energy work in that way.
Yeah.
Outside of the therapy role, in a coach or even consultant role, if I have that person's permission and that's what we're doing, then that's a different story. Wearing a different hat means being able to follow some different rules based off of what that person needs and what feels right and authentic in the moment.
I think you bring up a great point too of like authenticity can mean different things in those different settings. And it's just, we're bound by those different rules. And it doesn't mean that you're not being authentic. You're just having to wear like kind of following those bounds and maybe getting creative with, well, you're still gonna be a wonderful healer and a space holder in that therapy hat. You're just not going to be able to maybe lean on maybe the touching like you would and maybe some of the more consultant or coaching again with obvious permissions and expectations and clear boundaries, all those good things. But
Yeah,
do you think that that's
absolutely.
hard for folks to kind of like change, because we can't always be the same person in every single setting. And so changing what that authentic self looks like does, maybe you're speaking from your own experience, but is that ever like confusing or draining to kind of like think about, well, what are the rules here? Where am I going to lean into here? What does this look like in this setting?
I think it can be super confusing because those lines can be blurred or gray if you're not careful. And here's where I know this is one of your favorite words, boundaries is so important. If I'm wearing my therapy hat, it looks like this.
Mhm.
If I am not wearing my therapy hat, it can look like this. And so I have to be very mindful about which hat am I wearing in this situation. It's kind of like being, wearing a friend hat versus
Mhm.
wearing a therapy hat. I'm going to be a little bit different in those two situations.
Mhm.
However, I'm still myself. It's just the expectations you might have or the kind of the rules of the game might change, but I'm still myself. But you have to be really clear about that, don't you? You have to be really clear about what those rules are, what those boundaries are, what my expectations are, your expectations. And so, yes, I think it can get confusing. You just have to be well aware of where you are and what hat you're wearing.
Yeah, and I'm sure it takes a lot of like self-reflection, awareness, figuring out, well, what does authenticity mean in each of those things? Where are my boundaries? Like, something that we this kind of a theme in this podcast is a lot of this stuff is like sounds simple and easy, but like it's hard. It's work. It's mental work. It's a journey. It's figuring this out. And I think that that's kind of the theme of authenticity is like, well, sure, we all like the idea of being our true selves, being our
Mhm.
authentic selves. And it's actually really hard, like in reality, or it can be hard.
Yes, no, I am definitely one of those people that I'm a recovering people pleaser. I will always be in people pleaser recovery mode. And so it is hard to find that authentic self and go with it, especially when I'm switching roles because I'm trying to meet somebody's expectation of who they're getting in that situation. And so leaning into being authentically me is something that I can definitely find myself struggling with, and I probably will my entire life. Thank you, people pleaser self.
That's why it's a journey, right? Like I always make the
Absolutely.
joke, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so like I love my to-do list and I would cross it off. And when I went into my self-healing mode, I was like, oh, I'll just like heal myself and then cross it off the to-do list. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not how that works.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that people pleasing folks can resonate with that of
Mhm.
so, I mean, kind of a little off topic, but how have like I think a lot of people can relate to that people pleasing mode and that pattern. What's helped you being able to balance, because I think you're a very compassionate person, you're a very caring person. Those are great qualities, but sometimes we can get lost in those qualities and maybe
Oh
sacrifice
yeah.
ourselves. And so, how have you kind of been working on that and maybe leaning a little bit more into your authenticity?
I think that's a great question. So the thing that I really found to be the most helpful was starting to get in touch with my body, because when you are lost in helping others, or you're lost in one particular role, whether that's being a therapist, being a friend, being a student, being a mom, like fill in the blank, we lose touch with what's going on in our bodies. And so what I learned about was, okay, simple body scans, starting there. Body scan, how is my head feeling, how is my throat feeling, how is my stomach feeling, how are all these different parts of my body doing, because what I discovered was my body was sending me messages that I was not listening to because I was so focused on the other things that I'm trying to take care of, the other things around me. So, really practicing that, getting in touch with what my body needs, what my body is trying to tell me, leaning into that was so helpful. So that's one of the things that I practice with people that I work with is, okay, let's do this body scan, and now I want you to do this body scan outside of session because I want you to start getting in tune with what your body is really trying to say, what the messages are.
I love that. And like I know it's still a very like maybe very vulnerable experience for some people, but I think it's also very empowering where like we hear the word boundary, we hear the word authenticity, we hear these like big buzzwords. And I think oftentimes we think of the extreme, like that means I have to go have a really big heart to heart conversation with my partner. And it's like, I mean, you can start there, but sometimes it's really going inward and just figuring out,
Mhm.
well, what am I feeling? What kind of messages are going on? And that can be a great starting place to just
Yes.
figure out some of that stuff. Still very
Mhm.
vulnerable though. Like I don't want to like minimize that. Like it's okay if, I know some people are like, oh, I've never really felt this before. And that can be, it's very normal to feel those things.
Yeah, it is. I'm so with you. It's okay to go slow in that, especially with people, that may have chronic illnesses or chronic pain. There's understandably a big resistance to going inward. However, if we start slow at it and really start addressing some of the things that our body is telling us, then it's a little bit easier to continue getting leaning into those messages.
Mm.
And once we do, when we're leaning into what our body is telling us, what our emotions are trying to communicate to us, then I think we can be on that path of being authentic, right? Like
Mhm.
we're listening to ourselves. We're doing that. And that's authenticity to me.
For sure. I know one of the things that you do that's a pretty unique thing to your practice is brain spotting.
Hmm.
And so for folks who don't know what that is, can you explain what that I think it's gonna be like a very like up and coming thing. So I think people are gonna hear more about it, but I'm excited to kind of learn more from what it is and how you use it.
Yeah, this is where I really learned to lean into the parts
Oh,
of
I love it.
like the messages my body was sending me, because it's really important in this work. But essentially, the big quote of, if every brain spotter had a T-shirt, it would say, "Where you look affects how you feel." And
Ooh.
so it is this idea that where our eyes are positioned, not necessarily what we're looking at, but where the eye muscles are positioned at, is connected to a neural pathway in our brain. And that neural pathway holds an experience or a memory or an emotion or a physical sensation. It holds something that's kind of tangled up in our neural pathways, and connecting those eye muscles to that neural pathway allows our brain and body to do what it does naturally, and
Yeah.
that's heal itself.
Oh,
So in session, what I do is help somebody find that eye position. I have a wand that I use. We use bilateral music. I have these amazingly fashionable goggles. One of them covers this eye, the other covers this eye. So we
I
use some
love
different
it.
tools to help us find that specific eye position. And then once we do, then we can process whatever is stuck in there. So in doing that, we do have to be really in tune with our bodies.
Mhm.
I'll ask questions like, tell me when you're feeling XYZ that you're wanting to process. When are you feeling it the most in your body? Are you
Mhm.
noticing any physical sensations? Those sorts
Mhm.
of questions, because again, our body is giving us clues, and our body is giving us messages that we need to listen to so that it can process what it needs to. That's what, being the client in that situation or the person going through brain spotting, it's so important to really be aware of it, of what's happening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And yeah, I love like it just sounds very like resiliency based and strength based of like allowing your body do what it needs to do and it's like primed to
Hmm.
do. But life happens sometimes and things can get stuck or, other barriers can kind of come up. And so it sounds like it's a space where you can really like lift people up and hold that space and help them really process and move forward with some of
Oh
these
yeah.
things and very
It's all about
intentional.
trust. You have to trust your brain and body to do what it needs to do. I'm trusting your brain and body in those moments. I'm trusting my own brain and body in our work together. And so, yeah, there's so much trust
Mhm.
involved. And I think trust is a huge strength, and encapsulates resiliency at its core.
Yeah. So for someone like interested in brain spotting, again, it sounds like wonderful, but also very vulnerable. Cause I'm like, used to not be an emotions person. So like if this was Alicia, 10 years ago and you're like, oh yeah, we're going to go inwards. We're going to feel our feelings. I would be like, oh my God, that sounds like the most terrifying thing ever.
Hmm.
Um, do you jump in right away or do you kind of, for folks who maybe are a little bit more hesitant, is there like a slower, doing body scans, really like learning to trust yourself, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, it's always different, right? And I do some of that with some people. Some people really want that and need that. And some people are like, no, let's just do it. The cool thing about brain spotting is that like you get, if you're scared and feeling really vulnerable, like then feel that way. You don't have to talk out loud. You don't have to tell me anything. You can be, and I do have clients that are completely silent the entire session and don't say anything. I have no idea what's going on for them and what they're experiencing because they're not verbalizing it,
Mhm.
but there's processing happening.
Yeah.
And they report that. I can see that just in some of
Yeah.
the way that their body reflexes are. I can feel it in the room, but they're not saying a word. And so I think that gives people comfort that they have
Mhm.
some maybe control over that. Like they don't have to like tell me their life story and go into these
Right.
vulnerable stories if they don't want to.
Right.
The work can still happen. You get to trust yourself in
Yeah.
that.
That's cool too that it's like, I think especially therapy is moving away from these cookie cutter approaches. We all want the evidence base, like we're all trained in these things, and but then we get to really tailor it to the individual. I think we
Mhm.
know that no two people have the exact same lives and circumstances and coping tools and nervous systems and brain, all the things that impact people's healing. And so it's like using these core theories, brain spotting has a lot of that, but then you get to tailor it to the individual. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you want, if someone's like, hey, like I'm a verbal processor, let's talk about this, you're like, cool, let's have this space. If someone's like, hey, I kind of just need someone to kind of help facilitate this, you're like, cool, let's hop on this journey. And both are going to work just depending on the person.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's that person, their brain, their body, they are the ones, they are the experts, they are the like they hold everything that they need to process through their stuck points. It's not me, I'm just holding that space.
Yeah. Oh, that space holder. Like that is such a fun label. And I think it just like really rings true to you. How did you find that because I think that's, and I'll toot your horn just because again, I know you in different circles, but like you are a great space holder. You've created, workshops, you run a Facebook group, you run networking events, and you're very like humble and encouraging for the people around you. And I think it makes a really safe space for people. And so is that something that like, just yeah, how did you find that like that's a great role that you play in the community?
I think honestly, it's because I'm a people pleaser. Right? Like I could show up and give you what you need. Like here's where I get to shout out those people pleaser parts, and I'm not getting rid of all of them.
Mm,
Like they play a really important role in helping the people around me be able to show up for themselves and as themselves, just accepting whoever is coming in and giving them what they need, and at the same time being able to be myself in that helps connect that, right, where you can be you and I can be me and it's all good.
yes. Well, and I feel like you've done a great job of creating genuine relationships with the people in our field. And like networking can be very scary for a lot of people because I think historically it's very like grimy or very like transactional, and I think it's becoming more genuine. I think you've created a great space where people get to not just talk shop all the time. We get to talk about our families or fun events or travels or books and other parts of ourselves besides our therapist or coaching hats. And so do you find that that genuine authentic self helps in the networking realm?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Networking and even marketing, especially, I'm with you. There's this shift. It used to be very like used car salesman-y,
Yeah.
right? And it is not necessarily that way anymore. It can be that way, but really what it is, what the most authentic and I think most powerful networking and marketing tools is being yourself, creating relationships. That's what networking is. And that's why networking can be so draining too, because
Mm,
essentially you're creating relationships, friendships with lots of people. And so showing up as yourself and getting to know somebody, their families, their likes, their dislikes, just who they are as people, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to have good quality relationships. And so networking is the exact same thing. It's creating spaces is so important so people can feel hopefully somewhat comfortable to being themselves and saying, yeah, I love cats, but I don't love dogs, and that's great. You're accepted here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh,
And I will still refer clients to you, even though you don't like dogs.
yeah.
Um, but it's because I know some of the essence and the energy of who you are that makes me want to refer people to you,
Yeah.
or help you market your own stuff. And
Mhm.
again, that's what it's all about. It's about building relationships, pouring energy into others, because they're going to be doing the same thing if you have quality networking relationships. And
Spot on. And yeah, I can definitely feel like, there's some of the introverts out there and then that draining piece where it's like, oh, did I do something wrong? And then we can kind of like get inwards in ourselves. And so,
yeah,
do you have any tips for folks who maybe networking is a little bit more draining, but they do see that it's a positive and it does work out, and not just for themselves being able to be authentic, but then getting to connect with other authentic people. Any tips for those folks?
I'd say go slow. You don't have to do all of the networking things, and you shouldn't. Again, that would be pouring too much out of you, right? So go slow. If you find a group that you really enjoy, then do set yourself a goal, right? Once a month, I'm going to meet up with these people, or
Mhm.
invite one person to lunch. You don't have to do all of it. Just
Yes.
just pick one, and then make sure that you follow that up with a lot of self-care, whatever that is,
Mm.
whatever's pouring back into you. Um, but again, your body's going to tell you, oh, this was a lot to go
Mhm.
out to lunch with one person. Okay, now
Mhm.
go take care of what your body is trying to tell you. um, and if you can't find what you're looking for out there, then create it,
Mm.
because there's people that are going to be like you. I bet you, again, I'll go back to my like cat analogy, metaphor, or whatever. um, if you create a I only love cats therapy Facebook group, you are going to have other people join that. If it's not out there, go create it. Go find the
So
people
true.
that are like you. And uh, again, it's going to take some energy, but
Mhm.
if you're mindful about that, and if you're listening to yourself, and if you're pouring into your own self after that, then you're gonna set yourself up to be much more successful with that.
Definitely. I love the idea of like, well, I'm always a big fan of starting small. I'm like, it can build into momentum. We don't need to, jump to the finish line, jump in the deep end right away. But almost like that aftercare plan too of like, no, again, that's like learning about our awareness and what our body's telling us. And so if we know, hey, after this meeting, I'm going to be a little tired, maybe we don't schedule a really important meeting after a networking lunch, or we
Mhm.
take, maybe a longer lunch break, or just doing small but powerful things to recharge. And as you were talking, it made me think too, like those authentic relationships are going to pay off in the long run, where it's going to be less draining eventually, right? Like it's going to, just like learning a new skill or learning a new hobby, it's going to be a lot of work up front. But then, like, I'm thinking of like my best friends, it takes no energy being around them, and in fact, sometimes I get my cup filled up when I'm around them. In those beginning stages of building that friendship, I was remembering things, I was having to like gauge things, learning about them. I was having to like file that away somewhere, and I was using a lot more tools. Same thing with networking. It's the more that I'm connecting with these people and I'm being authentic and they're authentic. Some of them are a breeze now.
Yes. Yep. I'm 100% with you. Hmm.
So I love it. Well, any like fun things coming up in your world that you want to shout out, or things that you're going to be intentional about?
So let's see. My 2024 intention is kind of just not deciding, but social media. Just figuring out what I want to do with social media. Here,
Mhm.
going back to my recovering people pleaser self, I want to please the masses. That is so impossible, right?
On social media, girl.
Right? Leading into my authentic self,
Mhm.
I want to try to find what my voice is kind of on social media. So if you want to like follow me on Instagram and kind of watch my my journey and trying to figure that out, more than welcome to. In Oklahoma City this summer, I'm speaking at the We Rise convention. It's a convention for women, and so if you're in the Oklahoma City area, definitely get tickets to that. My talk is going to be, well, I don't know if I can say too much about it because it's
Just
actually
make sure
it's
to
exciting
follow
stuff.
along and then
They
she'll be
have,
able to
yes,
share.
go check it out, and it's on my Instagram page, and you can get tickets there. But that's coming up in June, and there's going to be several really great speakers and a ton of women that are getting together just to support each other and kind of finding their authentic self. This is right along with
Yeah.
it. So definitely welcome that. But yeah, I'm just trying to lean into my authentic self next year.
And social media too, like I hear you because again, it's not just our own authentic selves, but when we have a professional setting, like we are bound by certain laws and ethics of, well, how much of my authentic self. And so it is a journey. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to follow along with you. And
I'll figure it out someday.
you will, you will. And then I ask this of everyone, how are you practicing authenticity or working on practicing authenticity this week?
Ooh, that's a good question. So this week, when we're recording, it's the holiday season, and so it's very busy and lots of things going on. And so I have in my morning routine scheduled out 5 minutes. Again, it doesn't take very long, but 5 minutes to really check in with myself and kind of figure out what I need to do in that day. So that's my intention for this week is okay, what's going on today? What do I need? How can I take a breather? Because especially during this time of year, it can be a lot. So I'm staying authentic and checking in with me and trying to figure out what I need during this time.
That's awesome. And again, like, yeah, it doesn't have to be, a whole day. I mean, hey, if you can live a whole authentic day, love that for you. But if you just do a quick check-in, a couple of minutes a day, like that's going to have a profound impact. So I love that that's what you're allowing yourself to do during this maybe busier, chaotic season. So I think that's a great tip. Well, Billie, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a blast. I'm going to post Billie's websites, her Instagram, so you can follow her social media journey in 2024 and make sure to check her out. This has been so much fun. And yeah, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, the world needs the real you. So let's explore that authenticity together. Until next time, guys.